And I'd like to say a massive thank you to the Birmingham community who have really looked after us. And I also want to say a massive thank you for Judy Silkoff, who's very modest at the board, our Director of Operations. Where is Judy, who's put so much effort into the weekend? Well, let's give her a clap. She'll be here. Before we start the meeting, could I please ask Lenny Jacobs, the Warden of the Shaw, to come up to the microphone, because we're just going to do some housekeeping before we start. Lenny, you're being live streamed, just so you know. Could you come over to the microphone? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lenny Jacobs. I'm the Warden of Birmingham Central United Synagogue. Welcome. For those who haven't been here for the weekend, I can tell you we've had a wonderful weekend, and we're extremely grateful to the Board of Deputies and their executive officers and the deputies for joining us and giving us a very inspiring and enjoyable weekend. So thank you so much for that. We are part of the United Synagogue, and we're also following very closely government guidelines in view of the current crisis. And we would appreciate it very much if you would help us to maintain these standards, which is very, very important. So that means please refrain from handshaking, from other social contact, hugging, kissing. Let people have their space, don't get too close. There are plenty of sanitizers around, wash basins in the toilets out there as well, so there's everywhere you can take advantage of them. The food that you're going to have for lunch has been very carefully prepared. All the helpers and the waitresses have all been wearing gloves. And when you do get your lunch, can you please refrain from touching the food itself? There are servers provided. We want as little human contact with the food as possible. And that way we hope we'll try and contain this virus as much as possible. And we would very much appreciate your cooperation. Thank you.
Can I just also mention, in relation to coronavirus, I want to thank Lenny for that, and just make it clear that the Board of Deputy and the Shaws, that's Birmingham Central United Synagogue and Birmingham Progressive Liberal Synagogue, have followed absolutely United Synagogue and Liberal Judaism guidelines in relation to our visit today, and we've taken their up-to-date medical advice, and the decision to come here was a very informed decision based on that advice and in consultation with the Birmingham community itself. And I'd just like to mention that our own Gillian Merron, in her past life before the Board of Deputies, was the Minister of State for Public Health, and she had to deal with swine flu, the outbreak in 2009 and 2010, and she sat in many COBRA meetings with Andy Berman in relation to the management of that outbreak. And although the circumstances are different, there are different challenges. That's very relevant experience for the community. Gillian is also has led on Friday by e-meeting a forum of 60 CEOs from across the Jewish community, and Simon Johnson has also helped chair that meeting by video link in relation to the CEOs from all the JLC organisations, so that there is a united response in the community as to how we should be dealing with the coronavirus, and that will be obviously updated. There's another meeting in the morning, and we'll make sure that the community is fully informed. So can we now come on to the start of the meeting? I thanked Judy in your absence. You got a clap, and thanked the community for hosting the regional meeting. And it's very important that communities understand we are not a London-centric organisation. We're here to support you, and the regions are here to support other regions, and we are delighted to have the opportunity to be with the community. And we had the most fantastic entertainment last night by the students. And Birmingham has got so much to offer. And in fact, you might have read the Sunday Times this morning, and it says, "Who needs Venice when you have Birmingham?" Exactly. So there you are. And Esther, president of UJS, did a fantastic speech yesterday, and I'm really proud of everything that the students are doing, and their musical talents are quite incredible, and we had a fantastic evening. So can we please have, starting the meeting, could I now ask David Benson to come, thank you, to the microphone, who's going to give a welcome from the Birmingham community.
Madam President, Deputies, when I first joined the board last year, my first contact was with Bernice Black. She was so helpful, and her pleasant warm welcome made joining the board an easy and enjoyable process. When we were first invited to host a regional weekend, it was Bernice who helped us on our way and did such a large amount of work towards the organisation. Unfortunately, as you will know, Bernice has not been too well recently. I spoke to her earlier this week, and she sends her best wishes to us all and hopes we have a successful weekend. I don't know if you're listening, Bernice, but I'm sure everyone here sends you their best wishes and hopes you have a speedy recovery and a refer shalema. Within a few short days of Bernice having to step down, we were introduced to Judy Silkoff, who took over the reins from Bernice, and as they say, it was seamless. Judy, with her efficient, calm and pleasant manner, has been so helpful for us to make the arrangements for this weekend. Judy, we really do appreciate the way you, as they say, stepped up to the plate and made everything so simple and straightforward, and our thanks for all your efforts. You're at the back there, thank you. We formed a small committee in Birmingham comprising of our wonderful Sandra Lipkin, our superstar Daniel Clements, and his father Geoffrey. I would like to express my thanks to these three people who have given so much of their time, and we're only too happy to help organise the weekend, especially Geoffrey, who put in an enormous amount of work. Here at Central, we hardly have a function where we don't give a big thank you to my friends in Machatonim, Ruth and Lenny Jacobs. And this weekend is no exception. As always, they are so willing to be of help whenever it is needed. Thank you, Ruth and Lenny. And to the Central community as a whole, I would like to thank you all for your support and encouragement. We are very fortunate to have such a warm, hospitable and welcoming community.
Hear, hear.
2 weeks ago here at Central, we were fortunate to have our guest, Preet Gill, the first ever female Sikh MP. Today, we are pleased to welcome another outstanding Birmingham MP, Jess Phillips. In Birmingham, we might not be able to produce anything like a half-decent football team. I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Don't know why I mentioned it. But we certainly know how to produce outstanding young female MPs. When I spoke at the last board meeting, I said how important it is for the whole of the Jewish community, including London, that smaller killers such as ours here in Birmingham survive and maintain a presence, which is for the benefit of the whole of the Jewish community as a whole. And to have the board hold the provincial annual weekend helps reinforce this ethos. So it is a pleasure for me to welcome the various deputies and executive members. Firstly, can I welcome Marie van der Zijl, our president, who was elected 2 years ago, and she's been at the forefront in the fight against anti-Semitism within the party. Also here today is Gillian Merron, who was an MP for Lincoln and has been chief executive since 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, may I offer you the warmest of welcomes to our shoulder here at Central, and it is a pleasure that you have joined us for this weekend. Do try to remember where Birmingham is, and you'll always be welcome to come back. When I first joined the board, I found it a little daunting. The depth and range of expertise amongst the deputies was indeed impressive, as illustrated by the officers here today. The topics covered by the board impacts on all aspects of Jewish life, and it gives one reassurance that the Jewish community is indeed in very, very safe hands. And finally, to you, the deputies, may I offer you all a warm welcome from our community at Central, with what can only be described as difficult and unusual times. Currently, you have all made such a tremendous effort to be here with us, and we really do appreciate it. I do hope our guests who joined us for Shabbat enjoyed the early part of the weekend. President, ladies and gentlemen, can I just finish on a note that I feel very passionately about? The current crisis the world is facing, coronavirus, is creating problems the world has probably never faced before. But we all hope and pray, please God, that it will be a relatively short period of time that we defeat this disease. And sooner rather than later, we can return to our normal way of life. But there is one issue that, unless we take urgent action, will make the current crisis seem almost minor in comparison. I talk, of course, of the climate emergency that the whole world is facing. Whatever race, religion, nationality, or political belief, we all need to face the facts that unless we change our habits and behaviour, we could be facing unimaginable consequences. So please, please, always have in mind that we all must strive to do, and the Jewish community has a duty to set an example to the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, we look forward to a positive, constructive and enjoyable conference. And once again, may I welcome you all here to Central Shul, Birmingham. Thank you very much.
Can I just confirm for housekeeping that you're obviously all responsible for your own conduct and what you say at the microphone as usual, and you'll be pleased to know today that we can have up to 2.5 minutes. I apologise, the traffic lights are not very visible, but the computer is there so can clearly be seen by the speaker. And for members of the community, we have an allocated time for speaking, and when the time period is nearly up, it goes amber, and then at red, you'll find the microphone is usually cut off so that we can give everybody an opportunity to speak. Thank you, Robert.
With the permission of the President, I'd like to respond to the Chairman's welcome, beginning with some words from Torah. Yesterday in our Sedra, we heard the instructions God gave to Moses for Aaron and his sons, which included Ba'boem el Ohel Moev, Yirchatzu Mayim V'lo Yemot. When they approach the tent of meeting, they shall wash their hands so that they do not die. The Birmingham community has given us not just water to wash with, but also soap and hand sanitizers. So we've gone beyond, or you, Birmingham community, have gone beyond the instructions that Moses was given. We are, as you said, Mr. Chairman, living through difficult and unusual times, and I'm lost in admiration for the way the Birmingham community has responded to these difficult circumstances of coronavirus. Yes, my wife tells me, Helen, who lived in Birmingham for many years, unfortunately couldn't come, but she told me that at her shul, Rabbi Joel Levy said there were two ways of responding to coronavirus, Purim and Pesach. You can either respond like Purim, you're faced with chaos and you go mad, or you can do it like Pesach. You're faced with chaos and you make sure everything is in order. You have done it like Pesach, and thank you very much. We appreciate it. I know Ruth wanted to add something.
Ruth Friedman, Pinner United Synagogue. I was one of the visitors here, and I'm going to speak on behalf of all of us who came to enjoy such an amazing weekend here. And thank you so much to everybody in Birmingham, in all the communities, who gave us such generous hospitality. It was an amazing opportunity, I think, for us to learn about this community, about a regional community. Us from London don't know much about that, and I learnt a lot on this weekend. How you develop your relationships with your local other faiths, as well as each of the synagogues together. That was very impressive, and we could all learn from that one. I have to tell you, nobody shook my hand, but Everyone reached out the hand of friendship to me. Also, nobody hugged or kissed me, apart from my husband, who I brought along with me. But I felt the warm embrace of everybody here. And I have to say, without any exception, every person in the community came up to me and spoke to me. They were friendly and were most welcoming. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly on behalf of all the visitors. Thank you.
I think we should all stand up and give a big clap, and also in the room, just to say we've got Rabbi Jacobi, we've got Esther Offenberg, President of UJS, all the students, members of the community. So let's stand and just give a big clap. Thank you. Thank you. Can I just turn, please, to the minutes of the board meeting of the 16th of February. I haven't had any notification of any proposed amendments in the post. Does anything else need to be said, or can I count these as approved? Thank you. Valerie, thank you. That's very kind. They're now duly approved. Right, thank you. Moving on to the President's statement and the Executive Committee report. Just taking you through some of the issues. We've covered the wonderful welcome that we've had here today for the regional weekend in Birmingham. I do want to say that I was very, very proud to be invited to Lauderdale Road Synagogue. It was a really historic event. The ambassador of Bahrain was there, and so was Nancy Kaduri, who is the only Jewish representative of the Bahrain legislative, and she spoke very, very movingly about what it was like to be a Jew in Bahrain, and we found that that was something that went down really well with the community. You can see the issues in the President's statement. I don't know if anybody has got any questions in relation to this or in relation to the Executive Committee report, which is also in your pack. Deputies aren't normally known for their quietness. Thank you. Would you like to go to the microphone if anybody's got any questions from the President's statement or the Executive Committee report?
Richard Sassoon, Spanish Portuguese. Madam President, in view of the press reports this week and or in the last few weeks, could you please update us on the status of negotiations between the board and the JLC, and would you, in pursuance of our values of openness and transparency, publish any and all correspondence?
Thank you. We are a democratic and accountable organisation, and democracy is something that is always going to be at the root of our organisation. I am able to publish to you the two letters because the JLC has released my letter to Jonathan Goldstein and his response, and I will say that I do need to do a response to the JLC letter because there's many matters in there with which I don't agree. Just to be clear, last August, Jonathan Goldstein wrote to me expressing the view that there should be a talk of coming together, and I was very, very pleased to hear this. And on the 29th of August, I wrote back expressing my concern that this would be a very, very good idea, and I gave to him a copy of what's now known as the Jonathan Arkush proposals, which you received in your deputy mailing list, as a basis that we could have discussions. So I made it clear that I was very keen to do that, and in a separate email, I had also done a lot of work on a memorandum of understanding for education, because the JLC have something called PAGES, the Partnership Association for Jewish Education in Schools, and there's a lot of duplication and overlap in education. So I also hoped, as a means to get started, we could have discussions. But unfortunately, nothing further was heard on it, until you've obviously now read a few weeks ago. So at the moment, I'm afraid it doesn't look like the JLC want to discuss this, but I hope they do, because my motive is that charities are really, really struggling, and it is such a shame for the sake of the community to have such duplication and overlap, and especially with the onset of the coronavirus, resources are going to be pushed, and we need to find a way to come together. But I want to obviously make it clear to deputies that our democracy is something that is not obviously going to be challenged, because our strength is our democracy. That's why we are the democratic representative body. So this will be something that is ongoing, and because we are an open and transparent organisation, I've made it clear that I want to consult with the deputies. So we will be discussing this further. So I will get the letters out to you with the reply, and this will be the subject of a debate. We don't obviously have everybody here today, so you will find that we will start sending out questionnaires and having focus groups and discussions on it in the coming months. But let's hope we can find a way to come together for the sake of the community, which we all love and care about, because we have got enough resources if we come together. Thank you.
Robert Stone, Finchley Reformed Synagogue. Just following on what you said, President, not everybody in this room may have seen the JC this week, in which there is a comment by the President, on which I commend her, explaining what's been happening with the JLC and their stubborn refusal to actually discuss what's going on. I won't tell you what I think of the behaviour of these arrogant and paternalistic people, because that might be divisive. But I just wanted to ask you about the consultation, because, as you say, we, unlike some of the organisations who are blocking this discussion, are a democratic one, and I hope that when you write, you'll encourage deputies to talk to their constituencies, because I know that my synagogue believes that it's important that this cooperation should take place, and believe that undemocratic institutions should actually listen to democratic ones. And so I would encourage deputies, and I hope you will, to consult their synagogue councils and so on to find out what they think about this.
Thank you. I will, but I want to stress that in both organisations you've got a very high calibre of lay leadership, so it's very important we recognise the skills and the talent also across the community. But I'm very much in favour of trying to find a way to come together. And I know that change can be difficult, and people like to shoot the messenger, probably me, for mentioning it. But I think it's the responsible thing to do, especially where so many charities, we're hearing the strain that they're under, and we've just got to find a way to work together to get the very best that we can for all of us. So I hope that we will have some sensible discussions, but I reassure you, we are going to have consultation, and as deputies represent their communities, of course, that consultation will involve discussing with their members. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. David? And could I please just remind people, although we're away, if you could just say your name and your constituency. Thank you.
David Farby, a further person from Finchley Reform.
Well done, Finchley Reform.
I apologise, we won't do it again. I did ask a question of the President about the JLC, which is quite simply that I think the great majority of deputies currently don't know very much about the JLC, and quite a lot of the deputies know precisely nothing about the JLC. We did get a presentation about 7 years ago what the JLC was, but time has passed. You did say that we might go on to the JLC's website, but I think it would be very helpful if we could all get a note as to precisely what the JLC is. I was speaking to a deputy who's just joined about 2 years ago, and she said, "What's all this about the JLC? Who are they?" So I would like to know who now are on the JLC, precisely what their range of activities is, what their professional leadership is, and if there's anything in the public domain, not too sensitive, something about their finances. If we are going to carry the discussions forward, and I think we, the deputies, should be much clearer about this. Many deputies don't know much about it, would like to find out more. Rather than individually going onto their website, why not do us a little note summarising what the JLC precisely is?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that, David. Thank you. We will do you a note. We will explain the matters that David's raised, especially about financial sustainability, of course, very important. And when we have had consultation with the deputies, we will, of course, then be very pleased to invite Jonathan Goldstein, perhaps to our plenary meeting. It's been a while since Mick Davis came. It was a bit before my time, but I think many of you might remember that. Yes, yes. So that will be ongoing. So yes, thank you. Okay, we will do that. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Please come to the microphone.
Ruth Hart, Bournemouth Reformed Synagogue.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the honorary officers for raising awareness of social problems such as domestic abuse. I did tag you with the BBC report on Friday concerning two sisters from Bristol. Yeah. I'd like to thank the honorary officers.
Sorry, we're just going to say to you, could you just please perhaps bring down the microphone or come a bit... Thank you.
Can you hear me now? I want to thank the honorary officers for raising awareness of social problems such as domestic abuse. I did tag you with the BBC report yesterday concerning two sisters from Bristol who are being trolled for their campaign against so-called honour crimes. Regarding our pledge to stand in solidarity with all minorities, as well as to defend ourselves, both Jewish and Muslim women may be oppressed by hatred from without and domestic violence from within. Now, I have a personal interest in this, and is there something that I could do, and could I ask for any help? Has anyone got any experience with bringing this to public awareness and doing something about it, please?
Thank you. That's very, very worthy, very important. We are actually working with Jewish Women's Aid, and perhaps we can take this offline with you, Ruth, and we can explain what we've been doing and ways in which you can help. But thank you, that's very, very important. Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. I've had a right of reply request, so I'll let Robert Stone come to the stand. He will explain this. Thank you.
For the third and last time, I am told that Deputy, who is not here for the Reform Movement, Andrew Gilbert, has put on the live stream that I do not represent Finchley Reformed Synagogue, that I haven't consulted them, and I had no right to express my opinion. I would say three things. First of all, I do represent Finchley Reformed Synagogue. I'm a deputy for Finchley Reformed Synagogue, and I have consulted my fellow deputy. He does not represent Finchley Reformed Synagogue, and he doesn't know who I've consulted. Secondly, I said I'm not going to express my opinion because I hope the President will encourage us to consult our constituencies, which is what I precisely intend to do. I hope he will consult his and will stop throwing mud at other deputies. One of the things I admire about our current President is that she stopped us doing that kind of thing. And frankly, how dare somebody say, I don't represent my synagogue? I am not a delegate, I am a deputy, and I have a right to express my opinion, and I said I'm not going to express it now because I'm going to consult my synagogue. So let's please stop this bickering.
Thank you. And it is very important how we treat each other with dignity and respect when we advocate views, and that also includes when we consult with the Jewish Leadership Council, who did say that they would agree at least to set up a committee to look at the relationship with the board. So we will take this in stages, and there will be full consultation. And I agree with Jonathan, this is no time for deputies to be attacking other deputies, because we are a democratic organisation and no deputy should prevent another from giving their opinion. I'm also pleased now to be able to say to you that we have outside Jess Phillips, who's coming in to address us, and Jess has brought her son with her. So I hope, Danny, that you'll give Jess a big hand, because she has been very, very good in the way that she's tried to help the Jewish community. She's been very forthright and open. She's come to Limud. She's been incredible. So thank you. Can we give a big hand? Hello. Please. Danny, do you want to sit down? Anywhere you like. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for having me. It's a pleasure it's for a number of reasons, it's a pleasure to have you all here in Birmingham, because normally events that I have to do at the weekend, often I have to go elsewhere, so it's always nice to be 7 minutes from my house, which this building is. So it was a very, we left half an hour early, and then I was like, why have we left so early? There's no traffic on the road because everybody is in some sort of state of panic. So it's a pleasure to be here, just moments from my own home today, with the Board of Deputies. I mean, as a Labour politician, it's not incredibly difficult, actually, that would be a lie. It is the task of all Labour politicians, for however long it takes, I wouldn't put a limit on it, to ensure that we are doing as much as can possibly be done to not just win back the trust of the Jewish community, but rebuild what was always a genuine and deep relationship between your community and the Labour movement. It is going to take time, and that is, I mean, I would have come anyway, notwithstanding the convenience towards my house, but also I would have come because it is the duty of all politicians to work with all communities that they represent, but it is of deep meaning to me to come to try and rebuild some trust with the Jewish community. With regard to trust in the Jewish community, I had no idea that Limud was such an enormous festival thing. It seems to me that at the moment there's lots of events where Jewish people descend on Birmingham, and when I went to Limud I had absolutely no idea how huge it was. I lost my car in the car park and was wandering around for some time looking for it, and Danny, my son, who attends all events with me at the weekends when I'm not in London, he came along and was taught by a rabbi there to play the dreidel gambling game, which when we got home I wished I had paid more attention to the rules of the dreidel gambling game, because when I actually tried to play it with him, he seemed to invent the rules that meant he got all the chocolates by the end, and I wish I had listened, and so I took to Twitter to try and actually find out the actual rules, and somebody just said everybody just makes them up. So I thought, well, Danny has truly assimilated here in this cultural exchange that we are now essentially doing exactly as would be being done in houses up and down the country on that Hanukkah evening. It is not, to put too fine a point on it, to say that for the Labour movement, and both locally, nationally and internationally, that there has been an era that will always be considered to be an era of complete and utter shame. It not only has the period of complete inactivity, the period of complete diversion from a very real sense that anti-Semitism was playing out amongst our ranks. Not only has that caused a rift between the Labour Party and the Jewish community, it has taken away any authority that the Labour Party has in order to fight any form of discrimination. Now, as somebody who, before I was elected to Parliament, I worked at Women's Aid, I have worked for race equality charities in the city, disability charities in the city, and LGBT rights charities in this city. And I have dedicated my entire life to trying to seek that people have equal rights, equal access and equal opportunity regardless of any of their individual characteristics. And I find myself in a situation where I can no longer give credible voice to that with a platform that I had built through the Labour movement, because there is a very real and obvious criticism that can be put straight back at my door around the problems within the Labour Party. So the effect of what has happened over the years, the last 3 or 4 years within our movement. And I have to say, as somebody, my father makes Jeremy Corbyn look like Tony Blair. So as somebody who has been around he's currently confined to his garage, taking orders from Twitter of things to make. We couldn't get him knocking up all of the dreidels for next year. I'm telling you, he's got an amazing woodwork factory going on, and I need him in there, and no one else goes in there, so he's completely isolated. But I have been around the hard left of politics for quite, almost all of my life. My Uncle Ray is a member of the Communist Party. It is not only in the last 4 years that in very, very left-wing politics there has been an underlying sense of the othering of westernized, the idea of the West being bad and Israel being completely and utterly enmeshed in that idea that then has, for many, many years, not just under the reign of Jeremy Corbyn, leached out into anti-Semitism. So it is not a new thing. It is a thing that was able to be countered and argued against and highlighted and pointed out where it was wrong and largely ignored in a fringe manner. It has always been an underlying idea of some sort of wealth actor keeping poor people oppressed. That is not new in elements of left-wing politics. However, what has happened over the last 4 years, is that idea, that view, regardless of any factual basis, was allowed to flourish as if it was open for genuine debate. And not only that, not only the debate about Israel-Palestine. Honestly, I could post a picture of what I'd had for my breakfast this morning, which may well have, had bacon on it, and I would still get asked questions about my loyalty to Israel. Anything I say, people will try and make it about the Israel-Palestine situation. I could say the kids' assembly was great this morning, and they'd be like, well, Palestinian kids don't get to go to assembly. There is such a strain of making a grievance as if there are goodies and there are baddies, and the world is that simple. So even in the space of that debate about Israel-Palestine, which there is huge debate to be had, and nobody denies that, but what has happened within the Labour movement, and unfortunately in right-wing movements as well across the last decade, is that has switched to what has become open, frank and blatant anti-Semitism. And some of the things that have been faced by my colleagues. So I have had all of these things said to me, and it hurts me that that sort of racism exists in the world, like any racism exists in the world. But the pain you truly feel when it is your own identity that you cannot change is being attacked feels very different. I know that feeling because I know what it feels like to be attacked by virtue of being a woman, or being working class, or being from Birmingham, which, believe you me, my accent is not universally appreciated. The reality is that what some of my colleagues, such as Luciana Berger and Margaret Hodge and Louise Ellman and Ruth Smith, have had to face isn't just something that could exist within the idea of a debate around global policy. It is harrowing, violent and aggressive anti-Semitism, and we expect that from the right. Do you know, I expect to be called a jihadist by people who ascribe to Tommy Robinson's politics. I expect idiots to play out that sort of fascism from the right. When it comes from the left, it seems to come with a sense of righteousness and almost smug nature that we can't be wrong because we're the goodies. We have to break down in society the idea that some people are heroes and others belong in the bin, because the world just simply does not work like that. Nobody is perfect. And we have created of late, and I obviously blame the internet. I saw Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the internet, saying it wasn't working for women and girls this week, to which my husband said, I wonder if they've tried to switch it on and off. And I was like, I don't think that means that they can't get on it, Tom. Bless him. It's certainly the divisive nature of the way that our politics and our discourse works at the moment seems to put people in goody camps and baddie camps and leaves no room for the realities of people's lives and the realities of difficult and complex global situations that people, you know, it is amazing how many people on Twitter think that they could solve the Israel-Palestine crisis. And one wonders why they haven't turned their hand to it rather than just spouting off online. They seem to have a huge amount of skill that is going untapped on the global stage. So we have got to, as a Labour movement, do a huge amount to recognise, to celebrate, to bring on board back again our Jewish brothers and sisters, because at the moment, the most honest appraisal I have heard of it, actually, and when I first read the headline, I thought, gosh, you shouldn't say that, because I thought she was asking Jewish people not to vote for her in an aggressive manner, but was a Scottish woman, a parliamentary candidate in the last general election, who just said, I cannot yet ask Jewish people to vote for me. I cannot yet ask that people could take that step. And because I'm so used to seeing anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, I had assumed she was saying something anti-Semitic when I first read the headline. But she wasn't. She was saying, we are not there yet. We don't just get to say we get rid of the leader who, it seems, under whom all of this problem has occurred, who seems to have given a green light to some of that discourse. It isn't enough that when you harm people so badly, when you turn against people so badly, that you don't have to do much, much, much more to rebuild those bridges. I won't feel, and we are a long way off this, I won't feel that our movement has gone far enough until Luciana Berger herself feels that she could return to the Labour Party. For me, that is the ultimate test, not only because she is a dear friend of mine, but because of all who departed, she feels the most fervent about how much the Labour Party has to do. We have got to make sure that our Jewish Labour movement feels not just tokenistically consulted on something. I know what that feels like to be in that room where if somebody feels that they've got to tick the box by talking to you. I am that person for the government very often. They're like, oh gosh, is this any good for women? Oh yes, we saw Jess, so it's probably fine. And then they go and do something that completely damns women. It isn't a box-checking exercise. The exercise has got to be fully with the agency of Jewish organisations self-organising within our movement, making demands that can be met and are met without question. I don't understand personally how when somebody posts a picture of the Statue of Liberty with a monster on its face with the Star of David sucking across the face, I don't know how that can be up for debate. I don't understand a system of scrutiny that looks at paper evidence. I'm somebody who spent a huge amount of time in the criminal courts being very, very badly let down by decisions made about violence against women and girls, and yet when there is paper evidence, usually it is a slam dunk. The reality of blatant evidence still being open for months and months and months of disciplinary debate, I do not understand why you cannot just say, you said this, you are out. The end. It does not bear explanation, that sort of image. It only says one thing. It does not bear explanation to suggest that Jewish people are more loyal to Israel than they are to whichever country they reside in. I am originally, well, I'm not originally, actually, I'm originally from literally a minute from this building, but my family have their origins in Ireland, and I was raised with very specific political views on the Troubles in Ireland. My father is from Derry originally. No one has ever suggested that my loyalties lie in Northern Ireland, ever, once, in my entire political career. Millions of people have suggested that my loyalties lie in Israel, a country I've been to twice. So I'm not even Jewish, and apparently my loyalties lie in Israel. I had some absolutely cracking nights out in Tel Aviv when I was about 19. You could say that about many countries in the world, that my loyalties also don't lie in. No one ever says it, in fact, to my Indian or Kashmiri constituents. Never is it called into question that their commitment to Kashmir overrides their desire to get their children educated or for the bins to be collected outside their houses. It seems to be exclusively for the Jewish community, wherever they reside, to be controlled by somebody elsewhere. The amount of shekels that I'm meant to have been given, I only wish I knew where this bank account was, because in this times of downturn, I think we're all going to have to tap into that Israeli money we've been piling up somewhere. The truth is that we have a huge way to go, and not only just in the Labour movement. I look around at a city like Birmingham, where the Jewish community, when I was a child, even this building, it was bigger, and every Friday, every Saturday, you would see Jewish families walking down the road. I grew up literally minutes from here, and you would watch Jewish families walking down Russell Road from King's Heath and Moseley, where I live, to get here to the synagogue. And when I was at school, there was a huge Jewish community at my school, and I see now, I mean, I was always really jealous of the kids who went to King David School because they got to finish early on a Friday. I was constantly like, Mom, can we be Jewish? I want to go to the Jewish school. They finish early on a Friday. And now I look around at the city and the Jewish community is far smaller, far fewer than it was when I was a kid. And I, at the same time, have to look at the rise of hatred that we see across, not just in the UK, not just in the Labour movement, but across the world towards Jewish people, the rise in anti-Semitism, that it is deeply important to me and for my children and for the children in my city that they are taught not just about the horrors of what occurred in Jewish history, but also about the sense of community. And I suppose the saddest thing about the fracture between the Jewish community and the Labour movement for me, for my father, the big trot that he is the sense that in the Jewish faith there is an innate socialism that marries so largely with that of the Labour movement that it is no surprise that they were such bedfellows for so long, that we have to celebrate the Jewish community far more and educate people far more, especially in a city like Birmingham, where the fractures in Israel, Palestine, in diaspora communities play out as if they are a reality here in our city. We have got to make sure that we are educating and acting together with communion across our communities. And in Birmingham there are amazing examples of that. There are amazing examples of Jewish groups and Muslim groups, especially, I have to say this, I'm sorry to the men in the room, but especially Jewish and Muslim women's groups in our city who do a huge amount to try and bridge a genuine divide that in a place like Birmingham could really act to harm and sow seeds of miseducation between a very, very Islamic community and a depleting Jewish community. And so those efforts that are made by, again, I'm sure that the men are up to it, but they just don't invite me to those things maybe, but the women's groups in the area are doing huge amounts to build a divide, across a divide, and show that we are all one community. And we are about to, my mum always said, never waste a crisis. And so we are, I haven't said that on Twitter yet because I feel like, you know, the people whose families are probably going to die or have already died might not appreciate that there may well be a silver lining in this moment of horror that we are currently facing, and that is that a virus doesn't care which side you fall on with regard to how you vote. It doesn't care which side you think is the goodie and the baddie in Israel and Palestine. It doesn't care about any of those things. And it needs us all to work together to look after each other. And so I hope in this time of crisis there will be so much more of that working together as a community. And I am here to do whatever I can for your community and for the Board of Deputies, and do whatever we can to try and rebuild some of those bridges with the Jewish community. Very welcome. Oh, thanks. I haven't got corona.
And can I say, I really appreciate, please sit down, all of the fantastic effort and your speech, because you're right, never waste a crisis. That really, really does resound, and we do need to work together. And I agree, being a woman, class, accent, I really associate with that myself, of the difficulties that people can face, and I think you've been very, very brave. Thank you. So, deputies, please come to the microphone, as usual. And because we've only got one microphone and we have our rules for standing apart, could you please keep your distance, and there's some hand sanitizer afterwards. You don't have to all stand. You could sit around this area, deputies, if you would like to. So the question will need to be asked, and then you will need to go back to your seat, and then Jess will come back to the microphone. Thank you. We'll get there. Thank you.
Richard Cohen of Loughton Federation. Thank you very much. This question is about Trevor Phillips. I'm very concerned. Trevor's, I think, given tremendous support over decades to facilitate communal harmony between the religions and between the races. And I feel now that, having read of his suspension from the Labour Party, that it's not so much because of the comments that he's alleged to have made that have been trawled up against him, which I think are at worst fairly mild criticisms, and they're certainly not Islamophobic. And I'm just wondering whether there's some scapegoating going on here. Thank you.
Trevor Phillips and I, because we have the same surname, often when we are together like to embarrass people who feel a bit anxious about talking about race and pretend that we're brother and sister. Because it makes people not want to say the obvious thing in the room. Are you really? Yes, we are. So we're not actually brother and sister, obviously. Look, you know, I think that it's amazing how the defence of being a lifelong anti-racist only works for some people. I think that I have to listen to some of my Muslim colleagues on the criticism about the things that he has said. And if I'm being completely honest, I haven't actually read any of the stuff that he was meant to have said. But I have seen some criticism from some in the Muslim community and the alternative as well. Some Muslim people saying, well, actually, no, that I don't consider this to be Islamophobic. But I do think that we have to listen to those people's voices if, now that this has happened, to look at some of the things that he has said. And he would be the first person, I imagine, who would agree with me that he's willing to robustly defend some of the things that he may have said and explain them. But if there are people in the Muslim community saying that they feel that what he has said is Islamophobic, then I have to listen to that because it's not for me to say. However, the timing does seem... the trouble is with the Labour Party at the moment is there is no good faith. I cannot say they are acting in good faith in taking these actions because I don't believe that there isn't one rule for one and one rule for the other. Now, I always think that's probably been the case, to be perfectly honest. People protect their own in almost every institution. However, at the moment, I know personally I have felt that if I were to say some of the things that have been said by some of my colleagues, I would have been kicked out of the Labour Party because of who I am, not because of what I say. And I think that Trevor Phillips is at risk of falling foul of both having said some things that people, now that they've been dredged up, consider to be offensive, but that, yes, he was also scapegoated. I think those two things can exist at once, and I think that they are both true. But, you know, he's been an amazing ally in race relations, and you cannot undo that massive work. But we need to get to a point with all communities, and this idea that you're either a hero or in the bin, I say it because as somebody who grew up in a very, very diverse community, I don't think any community is beyond criticism of the things that might become the norm, cultural norms. I don't think that any community is beyond criticism, and we have to be really, really careful that we are not stifling debate on criticisms about the way that people do things just because that's the way they've always been done, by immediately assuming bad intent through racism. And so we're not in a place in discourse at the moment where we can intelligently manage that, and that's a real problem because nobody is without reprieve.
Thank you.
Who's next? And then I know that Ruth would also like to ask a question, perhaps after you, Chaim. Thank you.
Chaim Ben Sion, Masorti Judaism. Jess, I heard you speak at Limwood and I've heard you speak here and very impressed. And I have to say, all power to your elbow, which is the elbow we greet each other with now, within the Labour Party and perhaps, who knows, in government with a reformed Labour Party. I just wanted to ask if, regarding the candidates now, who you would most see yourself serving under of the three. That's not a tough question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would most see myself, well, I could see myself serving under either Keir Starmer or Lisa Nandy, to be perfectly honest. I can't see how I would serve under Rebecca Long-Bailey. Not because I don't like her personally. I lived in her house for 3 weeks when I was first elected because I had nowhere to live, and her and Angela Rayner had a spare mattress on the floor in their living room, so I slept there for the first 3 weeks that I was elected, so I don't have any problem with her personally. But I don't agree with some of the things, lots of the things that she said, and I fear it will just be a continuation of the problems that we have had. But I could serve under either Lisa or Keir quite happily. However, the test of both their mettle, not just in relation to the problems of anti-Semitism and sexual harassment and other disciplinary problems within the Labour Party, but actually their test of their mettle as leaders, will very, very quickly be to show that they are in charge. So there is a huge amount of talk of unity at the moment, the need for unity, which I get, you know, it's a nice thing to say, but actually what we need is leadership. What we need is somebody who will show that they are in charge and what they will and won't tolerate, because trying to please all the people all the time will inevitably leave some by the wayside. And so personally, for me, I voted for Lisa Nandy for a number of reasons. I think she's more decisive. I think she's more will take better action. But also, over the anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party, there is a lot of sayers. There were a lot of people who said a lot of things. There weren't as many doers who actually took action. And Lisa Nandy literally took action to change something. And when she was offered a job on one occasion, she was offered a job back in after the whole Owen Smith event, she asked what they were going to do about anti-Semitism, and she wasn't satisfied with the answer, and so she said, I won't serve you. You know, these are actual physical actions of a person trying to change things, and so for that and other reasons. Also, we always have a dude. I'd like it to be a woman. So that's why I'm going Lisa Nandy.
I'm not a deputy. I'm the chairman of the Representative Council here in Birmingham. I'm also the vice chairman of this synagogue. I'm also the founder member of Nisa Nashim, which you referred to, the Muslim-Jewish Women's Dialogue Group in Birmingham, something I felt very strongly about. And I'm also the chairperson, you see it's endless what my capabilities are. I'm also the chairperson of West Midlands Friends of Israel. And I wanted to say, thank you, Jess. I didn't want to ask you a question. What I've heard makes me feel exactly the same as I felt about Preet and also about my dear friend Ian Austin. I've never voted Labour in my life. I can't imagine I ever will. But I did tell Preet and Ian I thought Ian would make a fantastic leader of the Labour Party, and then I certainly would have voted for it. And I have to say that if I was in your constituency, I would feel very moved towards voting for you, even though it's totally against the grain for me. But what I feel is very strongly is that with women like you and Preet as MPs for Birmingham, we have a lot to be grateful for, and I feel that that needs to be said very publicly. I mean, most of these people here are not from Birmingham, but my investment in you as a politician on behalf of the whole of the Birmingham Jewish community is to thank you for your known support, for your stand against anti-Semitism, for your standing up for Israel when it counts. I want you to understand that most people in this room, and I don't know hardly any of them, but I believe that most people in this room feel that standing up for Israel is important, but without a just peace or something, if whatever we're going to call it, with the Palestinians, we're never going to achieve anything. So West Midlands Friends of Israel stands up for Israel, but it also recognises that the Palestinians comes into this equation and that they need to be treated in a way which is socially, morally, religiously just. And I feel that I want you to know that, so that when you're trying to defend why you're being picked on for Israel, and you're not Jewish, you've never hardly been to Israel, that people like me and the followers, the 250 subscribers to West Midlands Friends of Israel, do appreciate your efforts. So thank you.
Do any more deputy? Thank you. Thank you. Two more.
Jeremy Michelson, Manchester Great New and Central Synagogue. Just how do you foresee what might happen as a result of the EHRC ruling when it comes? How do you foresee the Labour Party reacting to it?
Thank you. And everyone, of course, is taking steps to stand well away from the microphone. So thank you for everybody doing that.
Normally, when you're at like an event with a religious community, if you try and keep away from them, that would be considered to be like quite bad. Normally, it would be definitely considered that I was being rude. I think that the EHRC will come after we have a new leader. I mean, it certainly will now that we're in this time of crisis. And in some ways, I think that's almost a shame, actually, because I feel like the people who are currently in charge need... Well, actually, I shouldn't prejudge what it's going to say, but I helped give in some of the evidence, so I have a fair idea of what it will say. I think that they need to answer to that, actually, because racism of any form is one thing that can be explained away with, and all equalities things can be explained away with lack of education. Somebody's a bit old, it's not like that, it didn't used to be like that. Institutional, built-in racism has to be built. And that is quite a different thing. And so if the charge of being institutionally anti-Semitic, which I cannot see how they will escape that charge, because it isn't just idiots posting tweets. We're talking about motions to CLP meetings that are allowed, that say horrendous things, that dispel any complaint about anti-Semitism as nothing. There has been a huge amount within the actual institution and organisation of the Labour Party that has been so utterly questionable that if it were about any other faith or form of racism, would never be allowed to be put forward as a motion for debate in a Labour Party meeting. So I think that it will be Keir Starmer who's going to win the Labour Party leadership, and I imagine that he will take it incredibly seriously and try and do absolutely every single thing that it recommends. Any leader of the Labour Party now who takes over will try and do every single one of the recommendations, and inevitably what will happen is that some within the Labour movement will claim that it's a nonsense, it's a smear, and that they shouldn't have to do it, and they'll try and explain away as if there is an explanation for something like that. And frankly, in the event of that happening, I think that those people have absolutely no place in the Labour movement. If you think that we don't have to do something about it, find yourself another political party and go and join that one, would be what I would suggest. But that's not very unifying, is it?
Thank you. Okay, please. Thank you.
Richard Sassoon, S&P Sephardi Community. A genuine question here. How does... Sorry, a question here. How does the Labour Party's treatment of anti-Semitism compare to the treatment with regard to the feminism versus trans debate.
Do you want to...
No, because that's causing genuine friction, and I'm just wondering if it's the old adage of what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews, and that actually there's something that's spreading that's stopping debate and calling people bad names and trying to get people no platformed and things like that. There seems to me, at least, to be a lot of similarities when perhaps there are genuine, when there may be genuine issues.
Right, Jess has got limited time, sorry to do that. So I know there's one more question, so Jess can give shorter answers because of time. Thank you.
I thought I might, for one day, escape talking about the women versus trans issue, but no, here we are. So, yeah, I think it's exactly the same. I think that there is a huge problem with an us and them attitude, that it does seem that, you know, what starts with the Jews, you know, doesn't end with the Jews. It spreads itself out. There does seem to be and what I would say, the main similarity that I can find between the way that anti-Semitism has been handled in the Labour Party is the way that sexual harassment and sexism has been handled in the Labour Party for decades, but very much more recently seems very much like if you're a bit gropey and you're a mate of the leadership, that's okay, that it's not confined only to the way that they've dealt with anti-Semitism. The reason why anti-Semitism made such a huge, it was, you know, out in the media so much more, is that there did just seem to be an enormous sea change in the language, and that is the same as we are seeing the vitriol in the language in the debate that you're talking about. We're seeing that exactly the same, that you're a goodie or a baddie, and if you don't think 100% one way on everything, that you are literally, you know, you belong in the sea. And it's just not, the world just doesn't work like that. The world is not like that. It just isn't, and the Labour Party has got to stop pretending that it is, because the left always has to do better on these things. I wish that we only had to live by the standards of the right, who can call people, you know, things with watermelon smiles and call Muslim women letterboxes. I wish that we could only, you know, if only we were held to the same standards as Boris Johnson, we could get away with murder. But the left has to be better by virtue of the thing that it professes to be.
Thank you. Sarah Cowan, Union of Jewish Students. Hello. Firstly, I just wanted to echo what Ruth said about how much I admire your work and also your continued support of the Jewish community and young people and women and young women. And I just wanted to ask you, kind of on the theme of young people, I have lots and lots of friends who are ideologically Labour and feel very strongly about Labour's values and had to, sadly, as Boris Johnson said, lend their vote. And I just wondered what you think that the new Labour Party can do, the new Labour leadership can do, what you can do to bring back young people, kind of ignite that spark in them again, make them feel like they're not alienated, that they're not abused on Twitter for their religion and their ideological beliefs. Yeah, and again, thank you so much for everything that you do.
No worries. I think that young people, especially young Jewish women, actually have suffered the worst of what has happened within the Labour movement, because so much of the vitriol is online, and the online spaces and campus spaces where it has become it's really, really incredibly hostile. And I feel absolutely no surprise that people felt that they would lend their vote elsewhere for all sorts of reasons, and for being from all sorts of different categories of people, young, old, up north, down south. It went on everywhere, I'm afraid to say, as we can see from the result. What we can do, I mean, within the Labour Party, first of all, you can have you can have an actual zero tolerance policy with how people get talked to. That would help a huge amount. But the Labour Party has to do so much more to win back people's votes that were lent to the Conservatives for the very first time, regardless of their ideology, with regard to socialism or, you know, communitarian social democracy, that most people actually don't sit around all day thinking about which ideological framework they sit within. They're worrying about the bins. Especially my comments about bins, for the people who aren't from Birmingham in the room, you may not understand quite how awful the bin service is in Birmingham, and it is literally the most pressing issue for almost every single person in the city. It's a big deal, and it's largely because of Unite the Union. Anyway, less said about that, the better. The truth is that we have got to talk about the future and offer hope about the future, and not constantly hamper back to something that things that happened in the past, or rest on the laurels of the past, even the bit of the past that I really, really, really like and really changed my life, saved my life. But we have got to stop thinking that we deserve a right to exist without earning it through credibility. You'll win amazing amounts of votes back by being credible. I mean, Boris Johnson's the alternative. Can't be that hard. He's not credible at all.
Last question from our host, David, and then Amanda will give a vote of thanks, and we will have a break for lunch.
Okay, I'm David Benson from Central Synagogue here, so we sort of live quite close to each other, really, don't we? I know all about the bins, yeah, but I live in a flat, so anyhow. Thank you very much for coming. Really welcome to Birmingham Central Synagogue, and thank you, Danny, for being with you as well. You're a great boy, great man. What I wanted to ask you, Jess, if you don't mind, first I can say I think you're a brilliant MP and a brilliant person as well. Absolutely superb. But, you know, a lot of people who are in the Labour Party say it's not the Labour Party I knew. I don't recognise it now as it is, as it was. And the word Labour Party is a label. Things don't last forever. And maybe it's time that those people go away and it's you who goes and joins another party, where you've got all those colleagues who have left come and join, and the sensible people in your party join as well.
I can see the argument for that in a not first past the post political system. If the Labour Party declines at the rate it declined in the last general election at the next one, there is almost no argument for the branding of the Labour Party meaning anything anymore. And we've seen that in Ireland, the Labour Party is, you know, we've seen it in other countries, and then we've seen it rise again, like in New Zealand, for example. And to me, there's a couple of things. I don't want to let those people own the Labour Party. It is not the Labour movement that my grandparents helped to build. There's an element of like, go and play up your own end, this is mine, about it, but also it wouldn't have worked, as we saw. It didn't work in politics as it currently is, when we are literally divided into a binary. We currently exist in a political climate where binaries are everything. Yes, no, Brexit, Remain. We live in a very binary time. And for that time, the sort of plurality of coalition politics that exists in other parts of Europe, it just seems like it would falter at the moment. And my dad always said to me, don't vote for what you want necessarily, vote for what you don't want. And so you have to, at the time, make the decision for what is best to keep out the worst. And I'm not suggesting I've managed to do that successfully, but that is what needs to be done. But I make no bones about it. If the Labour Party continues to decline, we cannot just think that there is only one solution. Wherever there is a crisis, you have to look for a new solution. And if it became very clear that that was the new solution, it is just a word. So, thank you.
Thank you. Jess, I think you can tell from the warmth in the room for your words that the Board of Deputies and the deputies that are here are really grateful for the support that you've been giving and continue to give on the issues of anti-Semitism and all the issues that we as Jews care about in terms of religious freedoms and living here in the United Kingdom. I know you're familiar with the 10 pledges that we shared with all the leadership candidates, and they are, as far as we're concerned, the start point for rebuilding the trust between the Jewish community and the Labour Party. I think we all feel reassured and grateful from the words that we've heard today that, while we're holding the new leader to account for the actions that they're going to take in unifying, in showing leadership, but also in tackling these issues, that you'll also be holding the leader and the deputy leader to account. And we thank you enormously for that today. Thank you, and Danny, for being with us. And everybody, a vote of thanks for Jess. Thank you.
So we now come on to the division statements. You may have noticed that Sheila and Edwin unfortunately are not here, so when it comes to their statements, I will do my best to answer any questions for you. But in the meantime, can I please ask Amanda to present your division report? And anyone who wants to answer or ask questions, can you please make your way over there and sit near the microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear? Sounds all right? Good. So thank you very much. We haven't had a divisional meeting since we last met together in February, but that does not mean we've not been very busy looking at all aspects of the Defence Division plan. I just want to draw your attention to some of the work that we've been doing, in particular around getting a response ready in terms of our position on online hate crimes. I know that Jess was referring to the despicable way that some of her fellow MPs had been dealt with online, but this is something that we find and we know is happening for in terms of anti-Semitism on an increasingly regular basis. And so Tal Ofer, one of the deputies on the Defence Division, is leading a task force to look at the Board of Deputies policy on online hate crime, and we're working on that together. I was delighted earlier, just 6 days ago, to have a meeting with the new Universities Minister, along with UJS, the CST, the chaplaincy, and the Jewish Leadership Council. Despite the quips that this was the third meeting that we'd had with universities ministers over the last 9 months, what it does show was that the way that we come together as a community, and certainly in that aspect of our work, we are all very aligned in what we want to achieve, but also quite clear about what we all have to offer that's distinct, and how we can work together to achieve that. So I'm very happy to take questions from anyone on my report. Our report, I should say.
Hi, Anthony Bolkover at UJS. I read in the report that I'm very glad the Board of Deputies have been making statements concerning the so-called anti-racism charity Show Racism the Red Card. It seems that some racists only get a yellow card. So I was wondering, I also saw there was a letter including by, which makes it a bit more unfortunate as I am a Manchester United fan, including signatories from Sir Alex Ferguson and Eric Cantona defending the despicable decision by Show Racism the Red Card of keeping Ken Loach and Michael Rosen as judges. So I was wondering what next stages might be from the Board of Deputies about that. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Anthony. So we've been in touch with the Manchester Rep Council and our deputies in Manchester, but the Rep Council have good relationships with Alex Ferguson in particular, so we're reaching out in that way. Not in a public way, because that's not going to help. That's not going to help us at this point. So we are reaching out through, it's much better if there's a personal connection. And there's, as you may know, there's an AP, the Show Races and the Red Card have an all-party parliamentary group. And we are, we've reached out to MPs that are on that all-party parliamentary group to share with them the letter that I sent in February and to ask them to stand up against this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart, would you like to present your report and give me the soap?
Even the President has to pay me a small fee. It goes into the board's coffers. I would like to thank, first of all, our hosts for the quality of the lunch we've just had, which was very tasty indeed. Thank you for that, as well as for their general hospitality this weekend. I'd also like to thank them for their generosity in giving out so much of their precious hand gel so freely. On a more serious note, where are we with the work of the Finance and Organisation Division? We tend to fixate on the financial side of the equation, and you'll see from the Treasurer's report that was circulated to you that not a great deal has changed since last month. We continue to run a pretty tight ship. We are ahead of budget at the moment, but we still have to face the facts. There is a medium to long-term challenge in terms of the nature of our funding base. We are in the process of recruiting someone to take charge from in-house of our fundraising efforts. But at the moment, we have three main fundraising streams. One is the community contribution, one is the President's Dinner, another is the rep fees. And with the community contribution, it was not a little unsettling to hear from one of your number, whom I thank, telling me that, and Julian, that their particular synagogue had sent out the latest shul bills with the community contribution on it, but a note saying this is voluntary and you don't really need to pay it. Many of you have been contacted by the board staff over this past year asking you to provide information about how, if at all, your shul or organisation asks for the community contribution. It is so important that those of you who haven't fed back what happens at your particular shul or organisation should get back to us. It's really important because we need to address those particular organisations that are not contributing as much as they might. We're very dependent on you, the deputies, taking hold of this within your organisations and liaising back with the staff. On a more benign note, the virus allowing, we have set a date for the President's Dinner, November the 22nd, and Sheila, sadly can't be with us, is going to take charge of the organisation of that. And we're really after people who can be table hosts or help with a continuation of the work that Ruth Friedman and others undertook last time to get sponsors and advertisers. So please make yourselves known to us. In the round, our work has simply continued over the last month, as it has in previous months, and you're welcome to come to me offline after this meeting with any specific questions. If anyone has any questions in the interim, though, please feel free, or observations to make, I know, for example, that Sid Braham had something that he was talking about raising. If you'd care to, yes, please come up. Just while Sid comes up, I'll just reiterate that if it's something that's very detailed or particularly detailed, it's best to address that offline because I don't necessarily have all the numbers and detail with me.
Sid Braham. Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. Sid Braham, Barnet Synagogue. I actually had two sort of questions or points to raise. I'll ask the second one first and then we'll go from there. On the subject of the communal contribution, something that my shul has been doing this last week, we're part of the United Synagogue. United Synagogue, it's billing time now, and I believe the US want to send bills out as quickly, they're due Pesach, but get them out before the virus clamps down on too many activities, including shul billing. I managed to get some leaflets from the board on the communal contribution, which we've managed to stuff into the envelopes with the bills, and they are going out this weekend. We'll monitor the performance. Our performance isn't bad at Barnet, but it could be better, like probably every other shul, or virtually every other shul in the country. So we'll monitor performance, we'll see how successful it is. But the board, bless them, sent us far too many leaflets. God, you know, please God, we should have that number of members. So I have a stock of spare leaflets. If anybody would like some, see me this afternoon and we'll try and get them to, if you certainly live in London, we can get them to, we'll do a deal. But I don't really want to send them back to the board. You can have them. Can I take the other point now, or Marie, just be a little bit, please, lenient with the time. On the community briefing the 20th of February, and the community division report refers to a high-level delegation from the board that met an equally high-level delegation from the Federation of Synagogues. I welcome this engagement. The Federation has about 17 constituent members and something like 11 affiliated synagogues and organisations according to their website, but only about 7 are represented by deputies, and the communal contribution is below par. Did the delegates from the board check with the finance team on these sub-optimal figures, and if they did, what was the outcome? If they didn't, then I think we've missed an opportunity. I ask that when such meetings in future take place with synagogue organisations, that we can put representation of the board deputies and communal contribution on the agenda, because the former adds to our democratic representation, the latter is our lifeblood, and I commend that suggestion.
Perfectly timed. We have 10 seconds left, but Marie is going to answer that.
Thank you. To report, we had a very good meeting with the Federation. We did look at the communal contribution, but that's part of the relationship building. And I think it's very important that we make sure that we can help represent all parts of the community. So I viewed the meeting as something very positive, but of course the communal contribution would come hand in hand with that. But I think it's something that you should be proud that we've managed to have the meeting and that we all wish to have a good relationship. So let's keep it under review, but we for sure are looking, as we are across the country, at the communal contribution, because we all know we need the support to be able to carry on our good work. But it really was a very positive meeting, so thank you for the question. It was very appreciated. Thank you.
Spencer Nathan, Edgware United Synagogue. It's just over a year now until we elect new deputies for the next triennium. Could I suggest that prior to registration of new deputies, each FR or the equivalent is asked to send out a pro forma showing exactly how people are billed for the Board of Deputies. I think it varies, and I think every school should actually bill people for the exact amount that the Board of Deputies requires. I think it's an opportunity, since we will be registering new deputies and there will be an obligation on the school. The second point, I think, is that over the 3 years of this triennium, size bands will have changed for individual schools. Some will have expanded, some will have contracted, and I think it's important that we ask people, even if their membership numbers are confidential, which band they fit into. From that size band, we could assess whether they're playing their part in contributing to the board.
Spencer, that is all well received. Thank you. And with your first point, I'll be in touch with Lauren Cowles, the Community Engagement Officer, to look into that. The second one's just a pretty obviously good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Cohen, Loughton. Following the cancellation of the CST dinner, I thought there was an effective video that Gerald Ronson sent out asking people to make contributions even if they couldn't go to the dinner. So I feel that perhaps now is time for Gillian or Marie or even Stuart to publish a short video that we can send to our communities explaining why it's so important that the community contribution should be paid. My other point is the presidential dinner. I know customarily the honorary officers don't canvass opinion from deputies as to who a suitable speaker it should be, but I think the speaker is really quite crucial to the dinner, and certainly Tony Blair was the benchmark of the kind of the high caliber speaker. I think if you look back on the last general election, the crucial role that was played on LBC by various broadcasters, Majid Nawaz is one who I have in particular in mind. I think he did a tremendous amount to swing people who were thinking of voting Labour, especially Muslim voters who were thinking of voting Labour, to shine a spotlight on anti-Semitism. And I found him to be a very articulate man, and I think he's got a very good story. It's a kind of Baal Teshuva in a way of how at one time he leaned towards supporting terrorist groups, but now he's had a sort of a Damascene moment. And I think that we should show a debt of gratitude to him by perhaps considering him to be one of our speakers at the next dinner. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anyone else has suggestions, then we'll be pleased to hear them, either now or perhaps just offline, but thanks for that, Richard. Thank you.
Ruth Friedman, Pinner United Synagogue. Stuart carefully skated past the date of the dinner, which is the 22nd of November.
Ruth, I did mention it.
Skated is my word.
Oh, okay.
You should put it in your diaries. Are we sending out save the date cards? That's what most organisations do. At least the people who had a table last time could send a card to their guests.
Yeah. We will be doing just that, and thank you for reminding those who've joined us by live stream that November 22nd, all things being equal, will be when we have the next President's Dinner, which will feature yummy food, great fellow guests, and also, no doubt, a very, very good speaker. So that's November 22nd. On which note, as always, I'm happy to be contacted offline and away from these meetings, and yeah, I'll pass the baton back towards our President.
Thank you. Edwin, unfortunately, isn't here today, so I have the report from the Community Education and Interfaith Division. I've had one question by email, so I will read out the question. It's from Susan Pascoe. She's concerned about Pesach supplies. Retailers may not have enough for Pesach due to the current situation, and she would like to know whether or not a task force could be set up and ask retailers, for example, to see if rationing is required. Now, I know everybody in Birmingham is very well prepared because they've already ordered their Pesach supplies, but I do fully anticipate that a lot of people will have difficulty, probably especially in London. So I did mention at the beginning of the meeting that Gillian is chairing another meeting tomorrow by video conference of, I think it's about 60 CEOs of other... Right, sorry, I'm being corrected. Gillian and Simon Johnson tomorrow are chairing, talking tomorrow following the chairing of the meeting on Friday. And this is something that Gillian is going to raise tomorrow in the conversation to see if we do need to make contact with retailers, because I'm sure the community will accept that wherever possible we all should be feeling that we can have enough food for Passover. So it's a very sensible question from Susan we will take forward. Does anyone else have anything they want to mention? Please come to the microphone. I will do my best to answer for Edwin.
Jeremy Michelson, Manchester Great New and Central Synagogue. It's really not a question, Marie. It's just so that the people know that one of the things that the education section has been pushing really for the last 4 years is to develop a national system of volunteers going into non-Jewish schools teaching about Judaism. And Manchester is leading the way on this. We have sent out 800 emails to 800 schools, and we've had a very, very good reception. And myself, Anne Angel, and Eric from Manchester, and Eric Cohen from Liverpool, the three of us are part of their mentoring team. We have, in fact, been training. We've trained a group of volunteers, and they're starting to go into schools. So, and we're very happy with the results. I received a letter, great package of stuff on Thursday, and in fact, it was really for one of our volunteers, saying from children at the school they'd just been to, saying how great it all was. So that's going very, very well. And what we will be needing, though, in the next few weeks, assuming things don't come to a complete grinding halt with the coronavirus, is that the Jewish Living exhibition is going to Blackburn just after Pesach. We in Manchester, and we were not consulted about this, so we're trying to do our best to help. And I've emailed all sorts of groups of people who have volunteered teachers and who, in various circumstances, including teaching in shuls and things like this, asking for volunteers, and they've been sending their responses into Sarah directly. But we may well need some help because it's going to be over 4 weeks. As I said, it might all come to a grinding halt because of the coronavirus, but that's just something for people to bear in mind. Thank you.
Spencer Nathan, again, Edgware United Synagogue. This concerns coronavirus. Many synagogues in most years have a communal seder. It's just possible that there might be restrictions on the number of people who are allowed to go into communal buildings. Could I appeal to deputies through the board to contact their synagogues and make sure that the old and the lonely, if they are unable to go to a communal seder, are provided for within their community? It would be very nice if a letter could go up from the board alerting people to that.
Thank you. We'll obviously contact the denominations on that, but that's a very worthy thought. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well done, Ilana.
Ilana Davis, Birmingham Progressive Synagogue. I've been told by the leader of our Cheder that some of these schools in Birmingham and Coventry are using a Holocaust education resource from a company called Cornerstones. Her concern was that the curriculum seems to recommend texts like Boy in the Striped Pyjamas to Year 6 pupils and talk about concentration camps, whereas the Holocaust Education Trust say that education for Year 6 people should focus on the Kindertransport. Is there anything, is the board aware of this organisation called Cornerstones? And is there anything that we can do to guide schools towards the guidance by the Holocaust Education Trust rather than this company?
Thank you very much for that question. I'm going to take that offline and we will investigate that. I think you're raising a very, very serious issue because we do want to make sure that there is consistency in the way that Holocaust education is taught, and for my purposes, HET sets the gold standard. So you'll have to give us a little bit of time to investigate that, but we will. Very important. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anything else? I just wanted to mention, last Shabbat, I had I've had a few fantastic Shabbats recently, but last week I was in Northampton. I was very kindly hosted by Bruce, and it was an amazing community. But there was something there that I picked up that I wanted to share so that we can think about it. Northampton's a very small community, and there was a very good man who comes to the community from Mill Hill, and we were talking about the concept of twinning. For example, there are many strong communities, and there are those communities that really could do with some extra people on Simchas or Rosh Hashanah or other times. And I'm going to ask Edwin perhaps if he can speak to the division to see what we can do, because it's a very good way for the larger and stronger communities to actually support some of the more remote communities around the country. And I'd also say I had a very, very good visit. Where's Valerie? In Cambridge as well. So I'm very happy if anybody else wants me to, once the coronavirus is obviously over, for me to carry on going around the country. But really, that's such a special, wonderful part of the job to see all of you in your communities. I think we've got another question coming. Thank you. And yes, Finchley Reform, I had a very good visit there as well, not so long ago.
Sid Braham, still at Barnet Synagogue. I don't often speak at one board meeting. To speak twice is unheard of. Just picking up on the point that the President has just made, this is something that, this twinning, as you call it, something I suggested in a couple of areas many years ago and has never got off the ground. So I very much welcome this suggestion. I was originally told that the board, it wasn't the sort of thing the board wanted to get involved with, but please God, something will move forward positively on it, because I think there are a lot of, should we say, better endowed communities with the skills that could help those who would like some assistance, and it's something that is very close to my own heart. So I wish you Hatzlacha Rabbah in moving this one forward.
Thank you for that. Obviously, I don't know when you raised it, but I'm glad you did. And we are in different times. We move on. That was also something then that I obviously share with you, Sid. We've also got the Small Communities Network that we can work with, but this is a very easy way that we can all support the regions, and also we can see firsthand the benefit of that support. It's not going to be very much, surely, for a big community to want to take an interest in a smaller community, and it would be good then to hear from the deputies about what's been arranged and to see how it works. And I think we could have some good examples of that. And I'm going to ask Sid in particular if he wants to now take an interest in that, and perhaps he can help get that off the ground. And that will be something that we can take forward, and I will have a good chat to Edwin and Andrew Gilbert about. So thank you for your interest in that. Anything else on that report? Okay, thank you. I've got the report from the International Division. Yes, please go to the microphone. Please don't rush. No rush.
I have to walk that marvellous lunch off. David Farby, Finchley Reform. First of all, thank you, Stuart, for the kind offer to cover our railway fares. Excellent. Second, thank you to everybody for this wonderful lunch. Excellent. And thirdly, a comment on the International Division report. I just noticed one element on it had to do with the Zionist Federation lobby of Parliament. This goes on more or less annually, and I noticed that several members of the board went. It used to be the procedure of the board for every one of these, that all the deputies would receive an invitation and details of the lobby, and many of the deputies went. So could I suggest that in future, for these lobbies, that we revert to the previous procedure? All deputies are informed. Those who want to go can go, and those who don't want to go needn't.
Thank you. That's a very good question. What we'll do is we'll make sure that the details are included in the deputies' mailing in the future so that deputies can decide. So thank you for that, David. Yes, please do. Don't rush either. Come forward. Thank you.
This is not a statement, it's Hakarata Tov. I think we should...
So right, you've got 2.5 minutes,
I'm
no
sorry,
rush.
British Emuna, Flora Frank. I would endorse what David said, and I think we should give the credit to Eric Moonman. He was the one who used to stand up at every board meeting, and I think I went to nearly every one because of him. So I think we should give him a little bit of credit for that. And talking about speakers, you've mentioned such illustrious speakers, but I feel I went on Wednesday night to Lord Sax's launch of his book Morality, and I think if we could get him, it would be very appropriate, very timely, because he's talking about not I, but we.
Anybody else? Okay, would any deputies like to... We've got a little time, so if any deputies want to say anything else, you can come to the microphone. Anybody else? Okay, we've got a record now. Sid is now coming to speak for the 3rd time.
Only because I'm after another dose of the sanitizer. Yes, history is made. Madam President, deputies, Sid Braham, yes, I am still at Barnet. Didn't hear that. Madam Chairman, the Constitution Working Group survey needs to be back close of play tomorrow. No one's mentioned it, so I just have. I hope I haven't stolen anybody's thunder, but you do need to get your responses in. And there is some mention that there will be a focus group after this meeting. Is that still the case?
Yes, absolutely. No? Well, we will have to, Ben isn't here, but we will arrange, whether it's a different way to anticipated, a focus group, even if it's not in person. We might be able to use Zoom or other ways of communicating. We will find in this situation, because we have to consult. It's very important. Thank you for raising that, because this is something that Ben Crown and the President's Working Group have really worked hard on, so that the board can be fit for purpose for its constitution in going forward, and it's something that's been very important to me. So yes, if we've got any further comment, to come back tomorrow. Robert might also want to speak on this, I'm not sure. No, he doesn't, on the Constitution Working Group. But we will arrange focus groups, but it will have to be as best as we can in the circumstances. So thank you, Sid. Do you want to make it a 4th time, or we're done? It was the 4th. Right, fine, thank you. That would be very good, thank you. So as many of you can help, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Would anybody else like to come to the microphone? And then David Benson will come. Does any other deputy or member of the community? No, David, please, the microphone is yours. No rush.
Ladies and gentlemen, deputies, all I wanted to say was thank you so much for making the effort to be with us. I can't tell you what a privilege it has been to have you people with us, and the Board of Deputies profile in Birmingham hopefully will be a lot noticed than it has been in the past, and that's because you've made the effort to be with us. Please, please stay well, stay safe, be careful on your way home, and please look after yourselves. And let's see you all again shortly. Thank you very much indeed.
And just before we close, we know that we're going to be facing some challenging times, and more than ever it's important to remember that we're a community, we're here to help each other, and we've all faced many challenges, and this is something that all of the country will be facing. And as David has said, please stay safe, please follow all the guidelines. We will be in close touch with all of you. And if people start to become isolated, it's very important that we remember that that's a difficult situation. So we might be arranging, for example, even conference calls, catch-up calls. There's different ways that we can make sure that we try and stay in touch if that happens. So I want you to all bear in mind that that's something that I'm personally thinking about, because there is the toll on people's mental health if people do feel isolated, and that's something that we haven't experienced in a big way before. So we will be thinking about that as well, and we want to again thank you all for coming. We can see how much it's been appreciated by the whole community. Here, I've really enjoyed being here, and thank you for all of your questions and contributions and the fantastic entertainment and hosting that we've had in Birmingham, and we hope you'll have us back again soon. Thank you. And most of all, I would like to thank at the back, they are amazing. Hand it to the guys for their wonderful live streaming. Thank you for your patience, both of you.